Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. You already know who it is and who it ain't. It ain't your boy and it is your man, the blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing blacking and shining again, asking you to hit the mother cuss word share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So here's the deal. To make a long story short, I'm catching up today. First thing I'm going to say is that Red Sith Lord, shout out to him, brought something to my attention. And I knew it, but I didn't think about clearing it up for many of you listeners to make sure that you knew. When I get on old men, I get on old men largely because I assume that they've had time to figure out a lot of this stuff and they just didn't say anything. Because they're old enough to where they don't need the validation of the daggle, and they still talk to us like we should seek their validation, which they're never going to give. They yet have grown old enough to know that women are fickle, and they will abuse that. I don't think that old men started their lives off knowing what were lies and what was true. I do not walk around here saying, I don't walk around and say, well, old men were born or they reached a young age and they knew that these were lies, they knew that these women were full of it, and then they just turn around and deceive us. I don't make that assumption. What I do assume is that at some point they figured out how fickle it was to sit up and tell us, and how destructive it was to tell us, man, get all the punana you can, don't never turn down no peace leave. Real men get out there and try and get at these women. See, they're right about nature. Old men are. But they're not necessarily right about what they're telling young men in terms of the return on this. These old men who don't have anything have all had women leave them for a man that had something. So what this means is that they know the best thing to tell men is to get out there and get the things in life that you want. And even then, most of you ain't gonna be rich. So while you are naturally drawn to ladies, and that's okay, they're naturally drawn to men too. In this situation, your best bet is to not chase them and pursue them because they're not going to even appreciate that. So I don't think that they're not victims when they're young. I don't think so. I was speaking from the standpoint, or I was speaking from the assumption that they had learned certain things and they were still telling us what was not helpful to us. I was probably wrong for that assumption, but that's why I said what I said. Now, if I was wrong, I'll admit it. I also want to point this out too, and this is regarding a different topic. I'm seeing an increasing number of African Americans that are Muslim trying to deny being African, even genetically. There are some others that are Muslim and they will say, well, we do have ties to the Americas through certain tribes that our African ancestors met before Columbus, and I have no debate with those. That actually does make sense. It's held up to scrutiny. I've mentioned some scholars who were aware of some evidence of this before. I'm fine with that. But when it comes down to those who try to disavow Africa, I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Someone taught you a white supremacist doctrine. And you may say, well, we're the original copper colored, or we're the original Americans, and the actual lighter red or dark yellow people with the long straight hair are Johnny come latelys, or they were here alongside us. You could say these things, and I'm just going to tell you straight away that if you were taught to diss Africa for nothing, then someone gave you a white supremacist doctrine. Even if we do wind up being descended from the 12 tribes of Israel, that would be through Africa, not independently of Africa. But in any case, we're not going to agree on that. There is a documentary that's 3 years old, and I happened to see it, called Louisiana's Lost Tribe. And apparently it's about Chitimacha Indians, who probably number something like 10,000, if I'm not mistaken. Some say 1,000. And these Chitimacha they're recognized by apparently Louisiana's state government, but not by the federal government. Well, the Chitimacha have expelled some people from the rolls or from the rosters of the tribe. And guess why they did it? Apparently, the Chitimacha have this thing wherein they expel you from the tribe if you marry black, but they did not do this if you married white. I don't want to sit up here and claim anything to do with any of the tribes of original Americans that have a pro-white, anti-black ideology. I don't fib a guck how long they've been in the Americas. I don't give a rat's behind that they're original to the Americas. I don't fib a guck. I wouldn't care if they were black themselves. If they take this attitude, they're enemies. So that being said, I don't understand why it is that there's some black folks who keep on begging the Chitimacha government to accept him into their roster. I understand that there's certain individual benefits, like maybe you don't have to pay tuition, there's some health care. I understand stuff like this, certain tangible benefits. But you know what? I'm sick and tired of hearing about how people that aren't even part original America, not even partially as far as they know, getting acceptance into these tribes, and then black folks who actually have some admixture in them can't get accepted into these tribes, because some of these tribes, I've heard about this being the case with the Cherokee, with some of the Seminole, but not all. The Seminole actually fought alongside Africans and took some in as black Seminole, but they did not intermarry. This is not something that a lot of them did as a rule. But I've understood that there's division within the Seminole, but that the Creek and the Cherokee and now the Chitimacha have the same thing going on. I'm here to tell you that the tribes of original Americans that do not discriminate against you are not to be taken as enemies. And the tribes of Native Americans that do discriminate against you are to be taken as enemies, and you do not seek membership. The only way you should seek membership is if you're going to go in as a spy. You take their resources and then you sow discord from within to ruin their lives in exchange for this pro-white, anti-black sentiment. Because that's just the fair thing to do. We do not owe our enemies anything but destruction. And I don't have any more sympathy for white folks and their civilization. I don't care if even when I hear about so-called, I can't say the word, but let's say a mispronunciation of tourist. When I hear about so-called tourist attacks, I'm not capable of sympathy for them, except for their little kids. I can't give a rat's behind what happens to the adults. If it wasn't an adult, and most of them aren't really a major part of the problem, but they're sympathizers. The decision makers usually are. However, even a lot of the regular rank and file ones are sympathizers. I don't like what the Europeans did to the original Americans, but any individual ethnicity or tribe of original Americans that has a problem with us on the basis of us being black and has no problem with the pale face, so to speak, is an enemy. The Dene people are not enemies of us. They got problems with the Biligana, meaning ghost face, not us. Some of the Apache, See, the Dene means, the Navajo call themselves Dene. The Apaches speak a similar language, very related. They call themselves Dene. It just means the people. But the ones we call Apaches, they have a grudge against black folk, but they have a legitimate reason to have a grudge. It's the Buffalo Soldiers. They don't know about the Buffalo Soldiers that deserted and fled to Mexico. They're not told about that. So I don't necessarily blame them until I get a chance to meet some and tell them, yeah, well, actually, plenty of them deserted because they didn't believe in this and they fled to Mexico. And there's still a town that they started even now to this day called Mulatto, Mexico. It's on the Mexican side of the border. A lot of them are black to this day. They don't know that, so I don't blame them. They know about the Buffalo Soldiers that stayed and fought against their ancestors on behalf of the white man. And they have every reason to be upset. The Buffalo Soldiers were wrong even though they were obeying orders. And that's why a lot of them chose not to obey those orders and they fled. So when they're right and we're wrong, I can even admit that. But you take some of these other groups, the Shoshone, the Mandan, never had issues with us. We never did anything to them. Or even the so-called 5 civilized tribes, we didn't do anything to them. They were some of the major slave catchers and trackers. Some of the major ones. Some folks said that in the beginning, the recapture of fugitive slaves could not have been done without their help in the beginning. There were times in Virginia and North Carolina where some of those tribes would initially do raids on British settlements and they would leave the Africans alone. This was an initial pattern. That didn't last throughout all of what became the United States. The Cherokee, the Choctaw, they were major slaveholders. They wanted that they wanted de-white acceptance so much. And now I'm finding out that the Chitimacha were no different. My question is, how far does this go? How many tribes have this mindset? Some would say, well, Black Mind, you said you were Creole. Your people had the exact same mindset. No, I really can't say that they did. I really can't. Because as I said, a large chunk of the Creole population does not have a stereotypical Creole look. They just may not tell you that they're Creole because they don't expect anyone to believe it. Some of them never found out they were because their parents didn't tell them because they didn't expect anyone to believe it. But no, I really can't sit up here and tell you that the entire Creole community had this. It certainly wasn't a policy amongst the elders. Hell, the elders of the Creole community in Lafayette came up with a flag that included Senegal and Mali's flags. They've changed it since then, but initially they did. The other thing too was that there were Creoles that there were some Creoles that would get upset if you married a black non-Creole or if you married someone white. They'd get upset if you married anybody that wasn't Catholic. There were plenty that were like that. There were also many who really didn't take kindly to white folk. So I'm not going to sit up and honestly, even if that was the case, even if you came to me and you showed me that some documentation that the average Creole had anti-black sentiment, I don't feel a guck. That means they're enemies too, even if I came from them. But I'm getting sick and tired of hearing these stories of any of us begging for acceptance from anyone else. That's not what we do. And don't come along and tell me that SYSBM and IBMOR men are doing that. No, we don't beg for acceptance even then. See, for the majority of most of us in our lives, the place where we will not find acceptance is from black women and from black men that worship black women and value the black woman's validation, which you don't really get. So we aren't sitting up here just begging for acceptance. What most of us are doing really is we're simply saying, well, we're going to go where we're already shown some appreciation, especially when it comes to women. You're just mad because we're not chasing after you anymore. And that's a good thing. When Tiffany Haddish has to sit up and tell black men that she should be pursued, that's good. Keep it up, gentlemen. Don't make any efforts. Do not make any pursuits. Coach Greg Adams said this over 3 years ago, and he was right. Don't pursue. If you're going to pursue a woman that's not from the West at all. Because the Western broad wants you to beg for her acceptance and validation, and she's not going to give it to you. Unless, of course, she's big. Or she just had a bunch of other men's kids. I mean, that's the end of it. Some of you like to say, well, you know, this, and I've heard some people say that the war is over. I've heard others say it's not. I understand that certain battles are over. We've made progress. But if you ask Black mind, when is the war actually over? I would say that the war is over when either we're just not with each other anymore and we're not even expected to pair up anymore. Or it's over when Black Western women can look as good as Napa Shader. I'm only talking about her looks. I don't know how she really is. I saw her on a live stream with Shahrazad Ali. But until the Western Black woman can look as good as Napa Shader and say the things that she has said on these live streams about polygyny and submission and can mean them, we ain't won. The day that we've won is the day that either they just know right off the bat, we're not marrying them, we ain't pursuing them, we're not even going up to them and starting up conversations unless it's about business or we know somebody in person, we know someone mutually. The day that we've won is that day, or the day that they can look like her and some others that are nice to look at. Again, I'm talking about her looks. I don't know how genuine or fake she is. I don't know. But that day that we've won is either the first where it's just understood we ain't approaching them, or actually, you know what, the day that we don't approach them and the day that Black Western women look like her, say these things, and come for Black men, come checking for Black men, and not just the so-called high value ones either. What I've said sounds very unrealistic to some of the older school thinkers. I understand that. I don't fibber-guck until that day, till those days. Well, there's the other option, and that is that we just simply don't get together. And we're not expected to, and they don't look for it. And they don't come to us for any kind of non-sexual things until they are pursuing us for sexual reasons, including marriage. With their stuff together. And it's sad because that means that future generations would have to pay this price to make up for what past generations did to raise this price. And I don't think that's fair to even the sisters that ain't born yet. So where I see it, it ain't gonna be over for a while. The generation of them that just gives up even trying to draw us in is gonna be when the war is over. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna reconcile, get back together, start up the race again, bring back Black family. It doesn't even mean that. What it does only mean is that there's peace because they stop trying to draw us in and then divorce rape us. I know I went all over with this one this morning. There's a reason for it, but I've already talked long enough, so I got to get to work. Thank you for listening to Black Call, Black Mind, Blackout. Assalamu alaikum. Black heterosexual, non-select, even non-high value male power just because they don't like it, and Black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.